You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. Hope you're well, and you're doing especially well during this COVID-19 inspired lockdown. I hope you're not going too crazy, but I've got a bit of an elixir for you because we're about to talk to Louisa Thomas. She's in Sydney's Pepperhead. She's the vocalist. The reason for the chat with Louisa is to talk up the rather good, actually, it's excellent, EP, Words to the Wise. So here she is, Louisa Thomas from Pepperhead.
Hello.
Hey, here she is. How you going?
There she is. Yeah, I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm not bad at all. Not bad at all. There you go. You got your nice backdrop there and everything. I saw the gent with the NoFX t-shirt on. There he is. Horns up, raised.
And I'm here in Paris.
Oh, you are too. Of course you are. Is it Sydney via Paris or London via Paris, or where are you at the moment?
Sydney.
Sydney, there you go. All right, nice. Okay, so yeah, I'm in the middle of a block of interviews myself with all of the Firestarter artists. I try to set aside a night. I've got kids these days, so it's usually a bit of a challenge to sort of stagger it out. So I tend to say to the wife, look, I've got 3 or 4 hours available. Allow me to have a chat to all these great musicians.
Well, you've got to do what you can to keep sane as well, right?
Oh, well, yes, indeed. Yeah, when alcohol fails, music kicks in. Or is it the other way around? I don't know.
Funny you say that. Cheers.
Look, I got to tell you, Louisa, I do enjoy what you guys have been doing in Pepperhead there. And the name of the new EP, Words to the Wise. And I've read comparisons to Susie DeMarchi and Sarah McLeod that are quite on point, I must say. And I need to add Chrissy Hind in there as well. I've played many of the Pretender songs over the years myself because I'm also a musician and I can hear that too. Don't know whether you got that feedback before, but that's certainly what I hear. The band themselves, though, you got a full rock sound behind you. It's almost an early '90s vibe that you've got, in that you capture that live sound that a lot of the bands wanted to capture in the studio at the time. So you can hear that. I don't know whether your bassist is using a Fender P bass, but it's that thick, flat wound bass string supporting thick, jagged guitars, whilst the drums lock everything down to allow you to do what you do, which is effectively to deliver the goods. So, how has Words to the Wise been received?
Well, look, it came out at the absolute worst possible time, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a tough one. I know.
It really did. But funnily enough, I mean, and thank you for your kind of summary of the sound. He plays the Fender jazz bass, by the way.
Okay.
The machine was rolling with this release, and we didn't want to stop it. Usually we would support an EP. I say usually, it's only our second EP, but we would support it with a lot of live gigging, and that's what we do best. And actually, you noticing that what our recorded tracks are like how we sound live, and actually that's a conscious decision to try and make ourselves not sound overproduced, not to sound like when you come to a Pephead gig, this is what you're going to get. And Words to the Wise was, I think, a probably sort of slightly more sophisticated sound, however, than our first EP, House Fox Sessions. I don't know whether you've listened to that as well, but I think we've come a long way since we released that 4 years ago. This EP was a super organic, fun process. It was a lot of, we narrowed it down to the songs that we just really, really enjoyed playing live. And we actually sent out, we recorded a live session of around 12 tracks, original tracks that we've got, and sent them out to like all our friends and families and said, vote on what you think are the best tracks.
Sweet.
And this is what came out of it. And it was a lot of fun. We recorded it again at House Fox Studios with Ryan Miller. He totally gets our sound, and he plays in, have you ever heard of a band called Black Reno?
Yeah, I know him. Yeah, I've interviewed him before.
Yeah, of course. He's an absolute legend, and I think he really brought a sort of a slightly heavier sound out in us. And
he did. Yeah, that's what I noticed. Actually, I got to tell you. Yeah, it was a question I was going to ask a bit later on, but because you have done so much with Ryan and with House Fox, I think he does a fantastic job. He's very underrated, it must be said, with what he does. But what he has done, this is as a listener what I feel. He's captured the power of the band, which is hard. As I say, I'm a musician, so a lot of the time, how many powerful live bands have I gone around? Bands that are powerful live, have I gone and bought their CD from back in the 90s or what have you? And it's like, what the hell? They sound like two different things. Nine Inch Nails were a case in point. you know, they were terrible because live they ripped your head off, and then on album it sounded like. And I love Depeche Mode, so don't get me wrong, but if I want to listen to Depeche Mode, I will listen to Depeche Mode, not
Yeah,
Nine Inch Nails. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? But then they
yeah.
shifted it up. But I think what the point is that I think Ryan's actually captured what you guys, the power that the band has, the chemistry. There's that word, the chemistry between the four of you, I think, is in the band. So when you're working with Miller, is it a situation where you issue him instructions about the sound that you want to capture, or do you just do your thing and he just makes it happen?
Yeah, it's probably the latter. Mark doesn't even play to a click track. It's really like
That's
a live.
great.
Yeah, it's almost like a live recording. And we spent, I think, about a week in the studio with Ryan on this. But we're super tight anyway. The whole, raison d'etre of the band is live playing. So, we play and we play and we play. And I think we've locked in and we're pretty tight on our songs. So it wasn't really hard to recreate that sound in the studio. Ryan, Ryan's like, we've known him now for so long, and he will say, look, dude, you can do that better, or that really doesn't sound, I know you've got more in your voice than that. And then he also will say, no, we need something extra here, we need an extra guitar part. He actually really did direct proceedings this time. First time, we just kind of ran with it, but this time he really got involved and produced it as well. So it was it was a really it's funny that you talk about chemistry as well, though, because we are all really good mates, and I think that makes a real difference.
Absolutely, 100% agreed.
There's no bullshit either, there's no tiptoeing around each other on what sounds good or what doesn't, and there's an awful lot of support and camaraderie, and I definitely have felt that increase as time goes on.
What brought you guys together then? Because there is a chemistry there with you guys. I mean, on first listen, you're like, okay, I know there's something that's pretty cool about you guys, but I'm not sure what it is. And then I think, to refine the point, that's what it is. You can tell you guys get along. And I know that because I'm a musician, and I don't know how many live gigs I've done with people I can't stand and the like. And you hate the gig. I'm a covers musician, so I'm playing from like 10 until sort of 3 in the morning. And then you got to pack up, which is an extra hour and a half or so. So you're getting home at 5:30. You're not even having a drink when you get home, but you just don't enjoy the night as much as those ones where you're talking about the football scores and you're just hamming it up and telling jokes in between sets and all of that sort of stuff. So did you guys all meet? Was it Time Off or Drum Media in Sydney? I think it was. Did you guys meet back in those days and sort of make it sort of happen? Because it sounds like you guys have been together for a long time as well.
Well, there's a few relationships in the band. So I'm actually, as of only a year ago, married to the guitarist Kieran. So we actually met in a professional capacity, in a I suppose a proper job, and the music came from there. And then he's been really, really, really. Kieran's been really good mates with Dan for like 10 years. Like they're like buddies, and they'd knock around together, and like Kieran would sort of riff around on the guitar. And one day Dan just said, "Oh, dude, I'll pick up the bass and play." And Dan's like, seriously, he's like this genius. He could say, like, he'll be the sort of guy who'll say, right, oh, do you know what am I going to do today? I think I'll learn how to command a submarine. Or I think I'll, he literally is like, oh, I'm gonna be a pilot. So he taught himself, learn to fly. I'm gonna, like, he's a master coder. He's like super, super genius. So he's like, oh, I'm gonna pick up the bass and I'm gonna play bass with you. And that's literally just how that happened. And because those two know each other really well, they lock in like they have this sort of spoken code where they just know where each other's going to go. And actually Dan's become a real driving force from the bass perspective in terms of how we write songs. I don't know very many bands who write songs the way we do, but it usually starts with Dan now. And then going back to Mark, so Kieran's a mad keen surfer, and he was looking on Gumtree for a surfboard, and he ended up finding a drummer.
As you do.
So, Mark was on Gumtree sort of like touting his wares, and we sent him some demos of stuff we'd recorded back before House Fox sessions, and he was like, I love this. And he's like real old school Australian punk. He loves that He's into like Radio Birdman, Celibate Rifles, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And he brings that sort of authenticity in a way, I think, to what we do. And he listened to our tracks. He's like, I really think I can do something here. And the first time we met him, we're just like, yeah. And that's it. We've just all clicked since. And we always talk about this being our band family. This is our family. And just looping it back to what you talked about with chemistry, I'm really, really glad that shines through.
It's different, and I'm going to make an assumption here. You can correct me and slap me if I'm wrong here, but when you're in your 40s as opposed to when you're in your 30s or 20s, I find that life is a bit easier, I've got to say. And that includes being in a band, because there's no more bullshit. You just direct and...
Right, and you almost... It's not like you don't care, because of course you care. But I think you're after it. You're in it for different reasons. We started this band for ourselves, not like for fame and fortune or anything. And, that's not saying that's been like immediately forthcoming, but you do it for different reasons. And this is, whether it's catharsis, whether it's, creativity, whatever you want it to be, it is important to us for more reasons than it is for anybody else, maybe even. So we'll just keep on going.
The other thing I like about you guys too, so we've talked about the chemistry, but there's variety in your music, and that's deceptive. Okay, so your bass player there, is it Dan? Sorry, is that what you said your bass player's name is?
Dan.
Dan, yeah. I would hedge a bet and say that he wrote Psycho Sideshow. Am I right or wrong there?
Wow, yeah, this is brilliant. So yes, he definitely commandeered that song. So he. That bass line is...
It's a ska bass line. It's a nice bass line.
Yeah. It's epic. And, he totally drove it. He totally drove that song. And it's funny because Dan and I got, we got really excited and wanted to take it to a really, really dark place, Psycho Sideshow. I think it could have been even darker than it ended up being. But with that still almost... When we first played it, it was almost like a comedy bass line, and we were like, oh, is this a little bit, is this a bit too comic, but actually when it all came together, it's actually one of my favorite songs and one of my favorite to perform live. It's such fun.
I'd say it's my favorite song on the EP as well, I've got to say, and that's because I'm a bass player too. I play guitar too, but I'm mainly a bass player, so when I hear that sort of bass playing underpinning that kind of a song, it's rare. It doesn't happen that often because most bass players are pedestrian. They're just interested in they just say the big out, less is more. Well, I'm here to tell you, it depends on the context. It ain't always less is more, let me tell you. Sometimes you want the bass to actually dominate a song and actually bring to life the various melodies that are in the scales there. And I think you guys have done that really well. So when we talk about the variety, can you tell me who you're collectively inspired by? Because I can't even guess your influences, to be honest with you, because there's so much going on.
No, I think that's a good thing. We get asked a lot about our influences. We get asked to, I guess, categorize our music a lot. I think, it is quite varied within the band. Like I said, Mark is really got his kind of old school Australian sort of punk vibe going on. Kieran is really influenced by, I guess, maybe grunge, but he's Queens. He would cite his favorite bands as Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Queens of the Stone Age, Foo Fighters, that kind of genre. But he's also got his punk influences too. Dan is anything, like from Metallica to Biffy Clyro to Skrillex. Like he's complex and and he's like Johann Sebastian Bach in the bass lines that he comes up with. There's always like counterpoint to what everything else is going on. So he's like got quite a varied musical influence. And for me, interestingly, I didn't sort of grow up sort of loving, I guess, rock. I had a brother who was really into Judas Priest and Iron Maiden back in the UK.
Nice.
And I had to listen to all of that as a kid. And then I'm actually a classically trained pianist. So I spent my teens like just playing Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and like to quite a high level. And I guess really then the rebellion came in, and then I got into like sort of, I don't know, I got into English indie and then everything's developed from there. So now my musical influences are super, super, super broad. I often come back, funnily enough, to the piano. I'm really inspired by, songwriters like Ben Folds, who's a storyteller in what he does.
Sure.
Like
Great songwriter, yeah.
Well, lyrically, I cannot fault what he does and how he draws you into the song. And I'm nowhere close to that, but I always like, the idea of that storytelling in songwriting as well. And then when it comes to female musicians, my God, you've named the three up there, PJ Harvey, Brody Dahl.
I was going to mention Brody Dahl, but I wasn't sure because there's definitely a distillers thing going on with you guys.
We only really, I think that's come a little bit. I think that's grown. I noticed it when we first heard back the recording after Wise Man, and I heard, I did sort of think, oh yeah, I can feel a little bit in that. Yeah. Queens of the Stone Age has always been an influence, and certainly in terms of Kieran's riffs, and I think you'll probably feel that a little bit on Watch You Fall. But yeah, I mean, my God, Brody Dahl, like her voice. Jesus, she is insane. Like I could only aspire to have a voice that good.
Well, it's interesting. She's Aussie as well. A lot of people don't realise that. She's from Melbourne. She was in a band years ago. What were they called? It wasn't Girling, sorry. I can't remember. I saw them at Somersault down in Sydney years ago. Like I'm talking 25 or 30 years ago now. That's how long ago it was. And she actually met Tim Armstrong at that festival, and that's how she ended up. Tim Armstrong from Rancid, and I think that's how she ended up in the States. And of course, you mentioned Queens of the Stone Age, and I think she's just going through a divorce now with Josh Homme.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. I was out in Joshua Tree last year and went to try to locate the studio, Josh Homme Studios, and just being all sort of inspired by the vibe. Yeah, no, sad to hear about those two, but they're a power couple for sure.
Yeah, two very strong personalities. It's the bright light burns very quickly in those scenarios, doesn't it? I mean, you can only imagine what conversations about music would be like because they're both very capable human beings on that front.
Yeah, 100%.
But what about in the writing of the EP and in general? Do you have any? I mean, it sounds like everything goes along quite easily for you, but look, I've been in bands to know that it is never the case. So what challenges did you have to overcome in order to make the recording sound like it does?
Do you know what? I've got to be honest with you. We didn't have too many challenges. Honestly, we have found, and maybe we just all enjoy it too much because maybe it is also still quite, it's relatively new. This is only our second EP. So the whole process of recording is, I could do it every day. Honestly, I really could. I'm not sick of it. I'm not, it's the sort of thing where I just, oh God, I want to do this all the time. So we didn't, I can't say that we had any particular challenges. I mean, look, we drive and push ourselves. So Kieran in particular is a massive perfectionist and is always striving for, the ultimate sound. He's never quite happy with the sound or the tweak of that pedal or the, whatever it might be. So he's always like, oh, but really the whole process was super enjoyable and quick. And in terms of, as I say, writing, we also find that quite organic and pretty fluid as well. And it wasn't always that way. There are times like you go into the studio and just nothing's happening. But we, do you know what? Again, I'll just reference Ben Folds again because I went to see him launch his autobiography and just talk. And he talked about running the brown water, and it stayed with me because it's just super true. He said there's absolutely no such thing as writer's block. All there is that what's coming out is a bit shit. If you continue to run the brown water, then it's going to run clear. So you've got to just keep creating and keep it all coming out because unless you do that, you're not going to get to the good stuff. So, we've been in studio times where, you kind of sit there or you stand there and you like say, well, let's just play our set. And we all get a little bit bored of that. But actually, it's really important because that's why we're super tight and without sort of being too egotistical, it's why we've got a really good live sound because we lock in. But then you're like, oh, and it's usually Dan. He's saying, and he's like, let's try this. And sometimes something will come out of it and sometimes it won't. But the process now is he'll noodle around on the bass, and invariably with something insanely brilliant. Kieran just locks in immediately. Mark and I will sit there for a while, listen, just take it all in. He'll just start on the drums, and then what I do is I kind of riff absolute nonsense over the top of it, come up with a melody, and the lyrics come after the fact always. Okay. I never go in there with a song. Nobody ever goes in there with a song. It all happens organically, and there have been nights where we've just written 3 epic songs off the bat like that, and there have been nights when we've got half a song and we might come back to it a couple of weeks later because we record every time we do it. But there's always something, you know, and I'm amazed by it, but I kind of have to trust in the process because there's always something that comes out of it.
That is one of the rarest things that I've ever heard, I've got to say, because jam bands rarely ever, actually I've never ever been a part of one, I've got to tell you, and I've been in 20 or 30 bands or thereabouts, because people want to have their stuff heard over other people, or they want to be credited with the idea, that sort of thing, but you guys have overcome that. And I don't think that's got anything to do with your age either, that's just the personalities that are in the mix there. So there's none of this business about people sitting at home, particularly the guitarist sitting at home, writing riffs with a drum machine and putting it up into the cloud. Here, guys and girls, learn this, turn up to the rehearsal studio and we'll see if we can hammer it into shape. You guys actually go to House Fox or wherever it might be and go, right, what are we going to come up with tonight? Is that how it works effectively?
Exactly. There are 0 egos in the band in that respect. I mean, you know, I'm not pretending I don't have a big ego, but there are 0, you know, I did that. We are so genuinely just thrilled to be coming up with something and a sound that we like, and it's palpable when you get it and when you know it's there. Like, you know, Psycho Sideshow, I remember when we just nailed it and we were all like kind of looking at each other. There is zero ego, like genuinely. There is, you know, nobody's got their name on the credits. There's nothing like that. This is for people who just genuinely love what they do.
Do you guys all live on the Northern Beaches there in Sydney? Are you guys all from that part of the world?
Yeah, we're all within about 10 minutes drive of each other. Dan's up the road from us, and then, you know, Mark's about 20 minutes away. So, yeah, Northern Beaches. Obviously not born and bred. You'll hear that, but I've been here. I've been here 8 years. I think Kieran's been here 12 years. Dan about the same, and Mark's a local.
Look, I've got to say, I can't stand Sydney these days. You know, with almost 6 million people in it, it's just revolting. But my mother actually lives in Sydney and on the lower North Shore there, and her partner, Patrick, lives in Dee Why. I love going up there to Dee Why. And it's just got a special vibe about it, hasn't it, the Northern Beaches? And I know there's a ton of people that are trying to live there these days, and it's sort of hard to gain some footing in there on a real estate thing. But I can't help but think that that's had an effect on your music, in that it's a very positive vibe that you bring to your music because you're happy where you live.
I think inevitably, you know, what you experience in your life and where you're at is going to have an impact and an effect. And it is genuinely, you know, a really chilled and pretty privileged place to live. You know, what we have on our doorstep here, blows me away every single day. So I think there's definitely something in that. I think that, you know, there's quite a good scene. There's some decent bands come out of around here. You know, you got Ocean Alley as well, who are just up from Narrabee. And there was, you know, it was pre-COVID. There was a pretty good scene, and actually Sydney itself, like if you're talking about the CBD, is actually, as an English person, I was super surprised by how lackluster live gigs would be in Sydney, whereas in Northern Beaches, I mean, you've got some epic sort of just local venues. We play regularly. It almost became like our Friday night rehearsal. We play regularly at the Time and Tide.
Time and Tide, yeah.
Oh, look, honestly, what a great venue. It's, you know, not the most salubrious place in the world, but it is, but it really supports live music, and you will always, you could always turn up on a Friday night and see 5 new bands that you've never seen before, which reminded me of what, you know, live gigs used to be like in the UK. You could go to a pub on any given night and see just some, you know, really good new music. And, you know, and the Time and Tide really support that, Narrabee and RSL. So there are like a lot of sort of local venues which support the music in the way that I don't think the CBD did or
Yeah, it's
maybe.
been decentralised. I actually went to a boarding school in Sydney, and I remember listening to 2SER and Wayne DZ. It's probably no longer 2SER. I know is around, but the show that he put on,
Yeah,
which was called the Alternative Music Show, had been doing it even back then in the early '90s for about 15 years, focused on all of these underground punk acts. So you'd hear these punk acts that I can't even remember their names, but bands with names like Angry Samoans, and the I Walked with the Zombie Last Night band. I can't remember their name, but you'd hear them. But then he'd talk about all of these gigs that were put on, particularly in the northern beaches and scout halls.
yeah, yeah,
This,
yeah,
yeah, this is pre the insurance bullshit. Like if some stage diver decides to nail themselves or what have you. This is pre all of that in the early '90s, and I'm thinking, I've got to get. I never went to one, by the way, but I remember thinking the northern beaches must be where it's at because it's nowhere around where I was. That was for bloody sure. There was Parramatta had the Phoenician Club, I think it was. There was a couple of others, but more metal sort of places. But in terms of if you wanted to just get in the raw rock and roll, like the MC5 or Radio Birdman or the Saints, this sort of thing, which was more my thing back in those days. You really had to sort of find some of these scout halls, apparently. So yeah, it's just a great vibe, and there's a lot of great musicians that I talk to that have long since left the northern beaches, like Lauren Hart from Once Human is quite a big metal band these days. She's
yeah.
from DY.
Is she from DY?
Yeah, she's from DY. We talked all about, there not being a pub in DY, but there's still, that's why there's all these people drinking beer on the sort of foreshore there, just before the beach there, because there's no pub there. There's a few places you can sort of sit, but you need
Yeah.
a pub and you need a surf club, that sort of thing. And that's the only drawback to DY, I think. But overall, I mean, it all contributes to the wonderful sound that bands like yourself are able to make.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And like I say, just having the support of local venues to be able to get out there and play a lot, and you get, a good following, and you're always going to have a good time.
I better wrap things up. So before I let you go, how can people find your music? You've got the Facebook thing, obviously, but beyond Facebook, where can they find you?
Yeah, all the usual channels you'd expect. We're on Spotify, we're on iPlay, Deezer. We've actually released, in the end, we released Words for the Wise free on Bandcamp. So anybody wants it. Do you know what? Times are too tough. And, we want our music to be heard. We're not precious about, the minuscule amounts we're going to make on selling the records once all the costs have gone. So we just want it out there. So download it on Bandcamp. As I say, you can stream it on Spotify, and follow us we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on all your usual channels, and just support live music, guys, once it's back up and running.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. People down there in Sydney need to get out there and support you guys, because you'd be one of the first bands that should be on people's list if they truly enjoy killer live music, because you've definitely got it going on, So, hey, my final question for you is: should I refer to you when I release the podcast episode as Louisa Thomas, or is it Louisa Theobald as it's come up here on Skype?
No, Louisa Thomas, please. That's
okay, gotcha.
my name, not my ex-husband's name.
There you go. Okay, gotcha. I get it. Well, thanks a lot for the chat. It's been fascinating. I enjoy your music, genuinely enjoy your music, and please keep on doing what you're doing. Hopefully we get out of this bloody thing sooner rather than later.
Well, let's get out of it, and then let's give you some new tunes, and then come see us live. You're in Queensland, right?
Yeah, Northern Gold Coast, yeah.
Yeah, so we were obviously due to be touring.
I saw that. Yeah, you're playing Ipswich as well.
Right. Yeah, we were playing with the Gold Hearts. I think you've interviewed Marge before as well.
I have, yeah.
She's a legend. So we were doing a tour with the Gold Hearts, and so look, I would like to say it's not cancelled, that it's postponed. We'll definitely be back up. So it'd be good to get you along to a live gig, and you can see these vocal cords in action.
I'll be there. I'll drag Lee along with me, Lee Oliver along with me. I'm sure he'll be up for it too. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right. Thanks very much for the chat.
It's really great to talk to you. I've been looking at all your podcasts and stuff, and you clearly love and know what you do. So keep doing what you do, and let's keep in touch.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for the feedback. I appreciate that a lot. And agreed. Yeah. No worries.
All right. Stay safe.
Thanks a lot. You too. Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye. You've been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and the interview subject there was Louisa Thomas from the Sydney outfit Pepperhead. Thanks for listening.